Hello, it's Shannon Leisure again, and this is my video reflection for Module 2. Um, I have notes again, so I'll try to stick to those and try to answer the questions. I did find that as I tried to answer some of the questions, they're kind of overlapped a little bit, so I tried to bullet point everything out so I could try to make sure I did that. So, as I said in the previous video, I coordinate instructional technology through the curriculum department for my school district. STEM is a piece of what we do in our department. We actually have implemented a program, Project Lead the Way, K-12 into our district over the past 3 years, I guess. So, I'm also the mom of 3 daughters. So, and the wife of an engineer. So some of this kind of impacts me kind of personally too, as I read through the articles and listened to the videos and those kinds of things. So, so this is STEM and the minority groups. So I think despite the national focus on directing more students into STEM fields, particularly women and minorities, the STEM workforce is still not any more diverse than probably it was at the beginning of the century. So I don't know. Sometimes I think the word STEM is an important thing that they say in politics, but I'm not sure we're actually following through. The specific number of minority groups who enter STEM careers are either the same or we're decreasing a little bit. I'm not sure anyone is ready to be called somewhat of a crisis that we're having, but I believe there is an increased demand for workers in STEM fields that currently are not being met. So I think a couple things probably contribute to all this. I'm a trainer for a school district, so I think that teacher training is probably a important aspect of this. I think we're producing a number of unqualified teachers who are supposed to incorporate STEM instruction into their classrooms and basically just don't know how to do it. And maybe due to some pedagogy training that they haven't had, or simply they don't have time to do it due to the pressure of standardized testing. As educators, we learn. I think we go to a lot of conferences, we go to a lot of workshops, we do a lot of in-house trainings and stuff like that, and then we just don't have time to integrate. So the other thing, I think some of it's related to maybe some early exposure even with our teachers who are coming into the workforce. There seems to be an overrepresentation of unqualified teachers in school districts with that serve a high number of minority students. We're kind of there. I work in a low-income school district. We're about 80% low socioeconomic, and I see the need for those highly qualified teachers. We're in desperate need of those teachers. As we meet with HR or my department HR, and we look at our applicant pool, it's just not where we'd like it obviously to be. And so a lot of times, we question ourselves, how do we attract those highly qualified teachers and those who have STEM backgrounds. With that, I think is coupled with some low expectations for minority students. If we don't have the expectation, this is what we do in our classroom, and it's kind of a word I use a lot. Those expectations. If we're worried about standardized testing, benchmarks, CBAs, those kinds of things, sometimes the expectation of our students to really have those 21st century skills are really not there. I think there's a stereotype threat in cultural relevancy that we are facing, especially with girls. So the articles and the videos and stuff led and research shows that most often girls are performing the same as their counterparts as males on testing and stuff like that until they get to the higher level grades, and somehow that kind of changes a little bit. Maybe it's stereotypical that maybe the girl is not supposed to do that or perform well in math or science or engineering. So, and I think the same thing happens with our minority groups when we're teaching to the upper white class white male versus to every student. So, um, I think funding is another problem, both at local, state, and federal levels. At the national level, our policymakers talk about STEM being important in order to compete globally, and that's been since, going back to the first module, since the Sputnik era. But where's the funding? President Obama's recent campaign, Educate to Innovate, calls for 100,000 more science, technology, engineering, and math teachers. Fortunately or unfortunately, most of that funding is being leveraged through the private sector. Not much of it's actually coming from the government. Most will agree that there are very few policies that directly target high-achieving students with an interest in STEM at the federal level anyways. My biggest concern as it relates to this module of study is the achievement gaps in STEM education, the lack of policy solutions designed to increase participation and academic achievement for minority groups. So school districts rely heavily, I think, on local property taxes as a source of income, and that's just not in Texas, that's everywhere, or a source of revenue. So you look at the low-income areas produce lower tax collections, which produce less instructional materials, lower salaries compared to some of the wealthier properties. The disparities in the funding of public schools leaves a large number of minority students, I think, just under-resourced. I know as a district, with our background, we consistently look for other sources of funding. We probably don't have the community support, for example, like McAllen ISD has, where their whole community comes in and supports some of their initiatives. So we don't really have private sector business that's going to do that. So we look for a lot of federal grants, and right now there's not really anything out there. So we look for other sources of revenue. We're kind of in the process of building an educational foundation, which is to scholarship some of these things. But I know that funding is just a huge issue for us when we're trying to implement new policies. So I think there are several factors that can positively influence the success of minority students and ultimately improve the participation in STEM-related fields. First of all, I think parental involvement is important, and community support. We struggle with that too. We struggle with getting our parents into the building and being involved. Either there's a language barrier. We serve a high number of Hispanic students, or on the other end, we have relatives who are raising children who may not be actually mom and dad for whatever reason. So community support and understanding is important. The increased availability of bilingual education. I'm not bilingual. I did a site visit to McAllen ISD about 3 years ago, and I took a lady who works for me because she's bilingual, just to see their program. And so, but they have a huge focus on the bilingual education that serves as just breaking down a barrier for those who are interested in STEM fields. Early exposure to cultivate interest in STEM careers. So we have decided that that even kindergartners are tested into what we call our launch program, but our launch program, which is a STEM-related class. Next school year, all of our kindergartners will be exposed to that curriculum. Then again, they're all exposed again at sixth grade level, and then they have the option of going into those classes, 7th and 8th grade, and then of course at the high school level. So I mentioned that we provide that program, Project Lead the Way. So providing opportunities and support programs for minority students. So we Project Lead the Way. We also are recipients of the Texas After School Centers for Excellence, which is we call it the TASTE grant. over the next 5 years, and it's a little over $5 million. So we have a strong after-school program. And there was another article I read that after-school programs that engage children in STEM learning activities are important because this may be the only other time they are able to participate, or they're chosen or selected to participate. So we have an after-school program, a center at every campus, and we have 6 campuses, and each of them are related to either a STEM class center or a STEAM center. They provide a different mode of intervention and facilitates project-based learning, and I'm a huge proponent of those hands-on activities that directly relate to real-life projects. Critical thinking, problem solving, those hands-on activities. I have a principal who kind of supports that idea too, that it's not necessarily, and I'm all about turning the coffee machines off some days, but it's not necessarily about saving the paper, but about encouraging to, in all classes, to have a hands-on activity. Anyways, back to those after-school programs, and we do it before and after school, but they provide an opportunity for mentoring and exposure to role models. We have community members who come in, and maybe an engineer, maybe a math teacher from a college or something like that, that give them exposure to those role models. The example seems to be effective in reaching minority groups. So not only are we given mom and dad the opportunity for students to be at school until about 5:30. We bus them home during that time too, but we're giving them some early exposure to some STEM activities. STEM education provides a foundation and a portal to leverage success in life, I think. As a community of people providing education, I think sometimes we miss the boat on providing education with rigor that encourages problem solving and critical thinking. We are so pressured as educators to that standardized testing situation, and this is especially true with our minority groups. So the skills are important. Building on them and being able to use them in real life is important. So just to end things, I am a parent of 3 daughters. 2 are grown, and I have one that is in high school this year. 3 very different children. Before I got into what I do now, I was a math teacher for 12 years. So I kind of feel like I had some early exposure to the math field. My husband is an engineer, and he'll tell you that he hates the math part, although he probably knows it more than I do. But he was exposed at an early age to some very hands-on activities, and he loves working in the field stuff. So, and that's where he got it. We have our oldest daughter who is a computer science major, and she will tell you she's the minority in her program of study. She's got about a year left, maybe a little less than a year of college. On the other end of it, I have one daughter who's a hairdresser and does just fine. So my youngest one, we encourage her to take as many math classes and science classes, and she'll remember those teachers who had those projects, experiments, and hands-on learning activities, I think, in her classes, because she will still talk about those compared to the ones who are taking notes all day long. So I think encouraging those minority groups to be part of, to partake and not feel like they have been shunned or not good enough to be part of those STEM fields is important. But one of our first steps is being ensuring that all of our teachers have the knowledge and the skill set to implement that into instruction. Thank you.